Welcome to the Truly Expat Travel Podcast, where I chat with expats about their favourite holiday destinations. Let's be honest, expats are some of the best travellers around, always planning the next adventure, exploring hidden gems, and finding the best spots wherever they go. So who better to ask for travel inspiration? Welcome to the very first episode of the Truly Expat Podcast. I'm kicking things off with a special guest, my husband Troy. In this episode, we dive into one of the most unforgettable adventures, trekking to the Everest Base Camp. Troy takes us on an unforgettable journey into the heart of the world's tallest mountains. He shares what it's like to stand beneath their towering peaks, the challenges and triumphs along the way, and why high-altitude adventures are his ultimate form of travel. Curious about what it really takes to take on the Himalayas, or why some people are drawn to the thin air and grueling climbs. Troy unpacks it all and reveals why reaching Everest Base Camp might be more within your reach than you think. This one's not to be missed, so hit play, sit back, and let's dive into the adventure together. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you, Paula.
So my very first episode of Truly Expat Podcast, and I thought, who else should I bring on for my very first episode than Troy? You're in all my videos, you're all in my social media, so yeah, why not?
Deeply honoured.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go into, who you are and your expat life, but what I will do is we'll start off with what type of kind of traveller are you?
Great question. I would say I'm a fit-for-purpose traveller. So I like a variety of things. I do love an adventure and a challenge. I'm a curious person by nature, and I like to stretch myself. So that would probably be my preferred. But also, there are times when you travel and you just want to hang out, chill, have time to have your downtime, go to an island somewhere or somewhere that's just a relaxing environment. So, yeah, it just depends on where we are. Again, the adventurous exploration where I can challenge myself is certainly the preferred model. And then, of course, I guess at times I become the tag-along husband and try and fill the boots, as they say, and just come along for the ride.
I'm glad you put that one in there and it
Thanks.
wasn't you're just a solo traveller. I'd be worried. But yes, you come along on quite a few of my travels. So we're going to talk about the one destination that stole your heart. Can you explain what it is and where it is?
Yeah, probably the most recent climb I did, and look, just to be clear, it's probably more a trek than a climb. The journey I went on to the Himalayas was, just mind-blowing in so many ways. The fact that you can go to a place on our wonderful planet these days and still see something that's largely been untouched for hundreds, if not, thousands of years, and get to enjoy that in this day and age is, for me, I guess, an experience that's hard to put into words. And of course, it links up to my adventurous exploration favoured method of traveling. So, yeah, it was just an outstanding trip, and the culture and the people there, and even to little things like how some of their dwellings are built and have lasted for so long. It was fascinating. So, it was really it was a cracking one for me, for sure.
So I'm going to touch on two things that you just mentioned. Firstly, you do climb mountains, so it's not your first. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so some years back, I started to get interested in climbing mountains, and I got this real sense when I climbed my first one or two. There's just for me personally anyway, there was just a real sense of achievement that's not like any other. And when you're looking down on the world and seeing things around you, there's just really a special place, and it really ticked a massive personal box for me, emotionally and physically. So I started to generate an interest and have now turned that into the potential aspiration of climbing the Seven Summits. And the Seven Summits, for those who are not familiar, is the tallest mountain in each of the continents around the world. And I'm on that journey. It's been slowed a little. COVID and a few other things, the geopolitical conflict in some areas has caused a bit of a blocker. And actually that's the reason why I pivoted to going down the journey of taking on Everest Base Camp. Base Camp, not necessarily a mountain, but still the ability to go through a trek and a small climb to get to an altitude that was going to continue to test my body and have it prepared and familiar for those other climbs that I intend on tackling down the track.
Yeah, I think, and then you touched on trekking and climbing, and they're different.
They are. Climbing, there's the two elements of it. There's the non-technical climb and the technical climb where you've got the ropes and the sleds and you're really doing some shearing, and you've got the boots, particularly in those colder climates where you've got snow and ice that you've got to deal with, versus a trek that's more of an altitude walk, if you will. And all the mountains will have that part of them. Some of them you can get through that kind of approach right to the top. So, something like Kilimanjaro, for example, which is one of the mountains I've done already as part of the 7 Summit journey, was a trek. There was a couple of periods where we had a couple of rock faces that were sort of climbing with hands and feet, but not a technical climb. The ascension on the last day was a bit of a doozy, but other than that, it was a fantastic exploration into the largest single mountain on planet Earth, actually.
Yeah.
Where all of the other summits in each of the continents are part of mountain ranges. The Kilimanjaro is the only one that's on its own. So that was real fun.
Do you think base camp is something that I could do?
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't recommend Everest Base Camp as a bucket list item enough. And a few reasons why. Firstly, the group that I went on was a little bit larger than I would have liked, but great people nonetheless. So the group was about 15 or 16, and we had people from late 30s through to, I think the eldest one or two of the journey were 69. Again, not super fit people, your average Joe, average Sue, people
What
who...
are you saying? Are you trying to tell me I'm not fit?
No, not at all. What I'm trying to encourage is that when people hear Everest, regardless if it's Mount Summit or Everest Base Camp, there's a balk that comes in. But I can't tell you that. Sorry, my point is that the trek in itself, and even the altitude, and the guys who took us on the journey tested blood oxygen levels and your body's ability to tolerate the altitude climb every day that we walked forward. Yeah, it was super safe, and everyone's health was obviously top order, no matter what was happening around us. But I'm very happy to say that we had 2 out of the 15 to 16 that didn't make it. One had a chronic set of injuries who probably shouldn't have started from the get-go, but wanted to push himself and whatever else. And there was another sort of gentleman, I think, sort of in his mid to late 60s, who sort of got just before Everest, maybe a day or two before, and one of his knees had just had enough. So he just hung there, and we went up and picked him and come back down, picked him up on the way down, and he finished it off. So other than those two, it was a success for all. And it was a trek. So it's a good walk. It's about, I'd say, anywhere between 5 and 7 hours a day. There was no real super ascending trek, so it was going to put your body, knees, hips, and those who might have some joint issues over time under real pressure. But again, the journey and taking a very slow speed as you do when you're walking or trekking or climbing at altitude, the environment around you is just something it's very hard to put into words.
And you went, do most people go in small groups? Did you go in a small group?
No. So our group was together. There were a mixture of other groups that were there with other organisations that provide the same service to take you to Everest Base Camp, or for those who are doing Everest Base Camp as a start to their ascension to Mount Everest and the summit. So it varies in sizes. The other thing I was going to say, which I didn't mention before, actually, is on top of just the whole experience of the journey, the people, brilliant, super kind, super nice. You feel like you've stepped back a few hundred years into a world where the Nepalese living like we did before all of the modern bits and pieces came to life. I mean, fascinating stuff.
Because it's quite a spiritual country in itself anyway.
Correct. And they're a very, up on the top of the spiritual religious side of things, they're just a very polite, delicate, and take care of you kind of people. So when you're in there, most of the places you stop at have tea houses, which is a very simple, big open area where you can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then rooms that are typically shared rooms, so 2 people per room. And then you have a mixture of shared facilities for shower and toilets on the odd occasion, or if you wanted to pay a little bit extra, you could go to a tea house at each of the stops where you would have a shower and toilet as part of the shared room that were
Okay.
provided for you. But no, really an amazing experience.
And what kind of food did you eat along the way?
Food was very simple. So breakfast was a combination of 1 or 2 cereal types, bread, and they did make plain egg omelets. So those were typically your starter for the day. And then, of course, you had water and juice as your options for drink. Lunch, when you got there, was a combination of a very, very plain vegetable soup, but it was nice. They had their spices that they dipped in there to give it a little bit of flavor. And then you would have rice, eggs, and some vegetables was typically the core. Variations of those for lunch and dinner was how it was served through most of the journey. So you got most of your nutrients. You can take some bits and pieces, and that's where the Kathmandu start helps out a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a big eater, and I found it, whilst the meals weren't big, I was more than happy to get through my day on the nourishment that was provided at all the tea houses through the journey.
So you mentioned Kathmandu. So I guess the first thing is, how hard is it or how easy is it to get to the destination?
Yeah, great question. I was pleasantly surprised on this one because Kathmandu was the sort of where everybody came to as a meeting place to get started. And Kathmandu from Singapore, direct flight, brilliant. I think it's maybe 4.5 hours. Now, maybe a little bit more, maybe 4.5, maybe 5. But I think Singapore Airlines do it once or twice a day, pretty frequently. There's a couple of other carriers that do it as well. So that was really easy. And Kathmandu is I'd call it maybe a much more smaller version of a typical Indian city that you might go to, like a Mumbai or a Delhi or a Bangalore. So similar culture and similar experiences there. And the hotels were your typical brands that you have. So we stayed at the Ramada Hotel, which is a pretty good hotel. And that was where we bunkered, did all our check-ins. We spent our first night or two, I think, just getting all of the admin work and pre-work settled before we then set off. And I think that's where most organisations that take tourists or people who want to do the trek will start in Kathmandu, again, because of the ease of being able to get there to get started. And then you move to your second place, which is Bukla. Nearly lost my track of... Yeah. It's like, yeah, so Lukla is the airport that you fly into with a little plane, where you're just outside the national park, and the Himalayas is part of a national park, so there's a fee and there's paperwork that's got to be done, which is typically organised with your tour guide or the organisation that'll take you on the trek, and you get started from there.
So is that how you got there? You flew into the airport?
So going in, we did a combo journey. We took a midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning bus that was about 4 hours up a interesting, and it was probably a good thing that we couldn't see that much outside, but basically one of these curly roads that go up the mountains to get to a smaller local airport. And then we took an 18-seater, and that took us to Lukla. The alternative is you just go back to Kathmandu, which is about a 20-minute drive out of town, and you can get a plane from the Kathmandu local version straight up to Lukla for there, which is what we did coming back.
I hear that plane is quite scary.
Not scary. It's a light plane. Lukla has been tagged the
most dangerous
airport in the world. But when you see, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 planes coming in and out of there a day, the scariness is actually just what it is. So it's basically a one runway, and the runway has a slight ascension as you come in, and at the end of it is a wall.
Oh, God.
So if the brakes don't work, there may be an issue or two. And then, of course, when you come down, you leave the runway, and basically it's just a direct fall off. Whilst that in itself might get people a little bit, I can't do that. It's fine. It's fine. As I said, we sat there for a day and we did one night there before we kicked off the trek. And yeah, there must have been 50 or 60 planes just,
Yeah.
and it was like clockwork. So I'm sure the tagline is probably one that was older. It's tarred properly, the runway now. It used to be dirt. So I suspect back in those days when it was dirt and the traction to get planes
Yeah.
up, down and up might have been a little bit more tricky. But yeah, no, it was a fun ride. And again, it's only I think it's 25 minutes up in the air, so it's pretty short. And they weight everything. So again, because of the tricky nature of landing on a small airport at altitude, a little bit of altitude, they measure your body weight and your bag weight just to make sure that when the plane goes on, it has a precise, so they get down to that level of specificity to
Yeah.
make sure that the plane has got the
Safe.
right weight, safe, and it gets there and everything it needs to do to make sure that it has a safe landing and departure is in check.
And is it one of those trips you have to have plans? You have to go with a guide and a tour company?
Yeah, good question. I would say yes. I'm sure there are, well, actually, I know you can do it yourself. The challenge is you've got to do all the paperwork yourself. So, knowing that there's a few stops to get to where you start, which is Lukla, you've also got to do your approval to get access to the Himalayas because it is a national park and there is a fee to enter the national park. And then you've got to organize all your stays because there's no brand at any of the points between your Lukla start and Lukla finish. So all of the stop ops up and coming back down are all family run tea houses.
And are you booked in beforehand or is it first in, first best dressed?
In terms of
The tea houses.
so it's all booked. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
the guys we had, Darren's company is called Peak Potential Adventures. They take care of everything. They're brilliant. So yeah, and then that way you arrive, you get to your destination, everything is taken care of you.
And was there a standout experience or a moment that made this trip unforgettable?
Oh, there's a few of those. I guess one that stands out is when you're going through, they do have rope bridges at, I think, 3 places. And for people who are familiar with Temple of Doom, it's not quite as scary as that. The engineering has been done quite solid. But when you're walking on a bridge and you're 100 meters maybe above the river underneath you, and out of nowhere you hear this whistle, and then all of a sudden about 40 yaks start coming
Oh.
past you, you're like, okay, I'm sure they've done this before. And these yaks have got like 100, 200 kilos of, food, drink, gas bottles, linen and whatever else the tea houses and the different areas may require. And that's their
Ah.
method of transport. And it's, again, takes you back. You think it's 2025 and you've got a
Yeah.
yak bringing up your groceries. It's, I love that because it takes you feel like someone's taking you back in time and super simple society, no qualms, no frills. The food gets there on time. They do this every day. The yaks navigate these treks that are probably 2 humans wide
Wow.
with such precision and discipline. And even when they go up these little curly areas, they just soldier on. They get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, and yaks, they live in that sort of altitude, don't they?
Yeah, there's 2 variations. Yak is one. I can't remember the name of the other, but one of them is good, I think, 3,000 meters above sea level and higher.
Mm.
The other ones, that's where they start to struggle. Even though oxygen, as I understand it, starts to get reduced at 4,000 meters. Yeah, they split the animals between the 2 levels.
And just on that oxygen and altitude, did you need to take altitude tablets?
I didn't. And I chose not to because my ambitions are higher. So this for me was just test yourself at something
Practice,
so
yeah.
that you don't need to. So it was good practice to be natural. But most of the others took half a tablet in the morning just to make sure that any wobblies were managed.
Yeah.
So it really is up to yourself. I think if you start to feel like altitude may be affecting you, then maybe have them with you just as a side bet. And if you don't need them, then don't use them. 5,400 is where Everest Base Camp is. It's not a monumental altitude, but for some people, it's a little bit of a
Oh,
struggle. So having something that can certainly help you along the way.
because I know people that didn't make it because of that and had to get airlifted
Mm.
back.
Well, the other thing too is with again the company I chose, and Darren and Chris and team took care of it. These guys check your blood oxygen level and or your oxygen levels in your blood and your blood pressure tests every day. And the minute they get a little bit of an inkling that not that great or it looks a bit dicey, they'll give you the right advice to ensure that you're set up for success for that day and just keep monitoring and checking you as you proceed forward.
Yeah. I mean, those sort of tours, you just want to make sure that you get the right guide and, you don't go cheap on stuff like this because it's dangerous.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's just you don't risk your health. I mean, that's
Mm.
something that's you just don't put into jeopardy at any point. And if you talk about the climbing Everest at the summit, which is not a cheap expense for people who want to go down that path, and that's hopefully something I might be able to tackle at some point. When you try and look for alternatives on cost reducing or trying to minimize your cost for such an adventure, the two things that are typically compromised to reduce costs are the number of Sherpas you have to support you and the number of oxygen tanks. That's the two most common ways that costs are reduced between different organizations. So, yeah, focus on your health and safety. Number one, don't compromise them, even if it costs you a few extra dollars.
Those two things are probably the most important. I could
Mm.
do without food, but not without a Sherpa and some oxygen in my lungs. So is there anything that really surprised you about this trip?
Yeah, I tell you, funny story. So, climbing Kilimanjaro was do your own tent every night.
Mm.
And I go in there and thinking, okay, we got 14 days up and down, 14 nights in a tent, shouldn't be too bad. Just before base camp, I think it was one night before that we hit zero as a temperature. So other than that, it wasn't too bad. But when we got to the first stop, I'm looking around for where is the place the tents are going to be and all this kinds of stuff. And Chris, the gentleman who was one of the gentlemen leading the tour, I asked him the question. I said, where do we put our tents up? He said, we don't do tents. There's tea houses the whole way. I said, really? So I started. So you mean you got to get a bed? And he said, yeah, didn't you know that? And I said, no, I did. Darren, who's the other gentleman who runs the company, the other climbs I've done with him, it's been tents all the way. And he goes, we can put you in a tent if you want. I said, no. No.
I would surprise you probably.
So that was a pleasant surprise. And although they're very simple, I mean, you get a nice warm bed in a room, and they're shared rooms, as I mentioned it before. It was lovely. And the local Nepalese family run tea house at every stop, and there are more than one.
Mm.
They look after your food, great service, super friendly, and yeah, help you on your way.
I was going to ask if there was a dish that we need to try, but I guess you don't get a choice, right? They give you the local dishes every day.
It's not so much local. So they're also wary that for people who are in unfamiliar territory and going on a trek to either Everest Base Camp or further up, familiar foods is certainly something that they play on. So, clear soups with some veggies in there, vegetables that are boiled typically. You don't often see meat, maybe a little bit of chicken here or there, but then predominantly eggs, rice, and fried rice with the normal stuff that people are used to in their home countries, and bread in the morning. So you can butter some toast or have some basic. I think they have one or two cereals that they offer. Is what most tea houses will give. It's familiar. It nourishes you enough to support you on your journey, so you get your carbs and you get your protein, and then some juices that typically get there. So you'll have your water or you'll have your orange or apple juice, and typically provided. Again, bear in mind, you stop in Kathmandu for a couple of days. So if you want to lug 2 or 3 or 4 kilos of weight for extras that you want to take with you that can predominantly non-perishable, take some fruit with you, take some bars. A few people did that just to have some additional supplements in between meals. I'm a big eater, so as you know, so I didn't find it a problem at all.
And did you take other food?
I think I took a couple of energy bars, but it was about it. But I didn't find I needed them, so I had them in the bag until I think it was maybe day 6 or 7, and it was only because I was just hanging in bed, chilling out, and going through my bag. I thought, oh, and I just had a snack, as you do.
Uh, so did you have any cultural experiences?
Yeah, I think just observing how they go about their day, not too much on the religious side of things, and the Nepalese tend to be quite spiritual and religious in how they carry themselves and their practices. There's a temple coming down at one of the stops that we had that was, yeah, I think 500 or 600 years old. The Dalai Lama had left his handprints and a couple of other things like that.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was nice to see.
Yeah.
We did go in one temple where they were looked like doing some form of silence or sermon in there. So you obviously had to be super quiet,
Mhm.
and you could only go in out for a very, very short period of time. But otherwise, I think culturally it was more, how they managed transport of all their vitals, their foods,
Mm.
their waters, their liquids, their energy supplies. How it really looked like you were stepping into a 16th or 17th century farm at
Wow.
many times. And then, of course, the Nepalese have their traditional dress, which is worn by most
Mhm.
that I saw through the journey. They were I guess, the key elements that stuck out. And then, yeah, just the simplicity of their lifestyle that they were happy with. That
What,
was.
so what's the best time to travel then? Is it seasonal? It is, isn't it?
It is largely because as you get higher up, there's obviously monsoons, a wet season, and it's colder at certain periods of time. There is some fluctuation in temperature, although, once you get higher up, it's just basically stone cold and that's it. Um, but the monsoonal season or periods of time, I think, play a little bit havoc with obviously things like avalanches, or
Oh,
the potential for avalanches through the mountains, and that may not affect your trek. Maybe you should get to base camp. God forbid if there's something that was massive. They did have an earthquake there 10 years ago, which was quite devastating in many parts. But otherwise, no. I think the guys offer the base camp at April and October. So at those ends, as I said, I think for maybe 2 days the temperature got below zero. The rest was not a problem. So your gear, you didn't have to get, the super sort of high altitude, minus
yeah.
40-degree jackets and pants and all that kind of stuff, just something that kept you warm and obviously generated heat as you were trekking. But yeah, and then of course the Everest climb, I think they have a window in between the 10th and the 15th of May. It's a small window because I think the volatility of weather as you get further up,
Yeah.
it gets a little bit out of control. So I think that's the sort of periods where
Yeah.
most tend to focus.
So I guess it's busy. Busy
Mm.
at base camp, right?
Base camp it is. It's like a little town when you walk in there and you sort of come in and there's tents everywhere. They do have a control on the number of permits every year
Okay.
that can climb Everest. Now, I think the limit in theory is about 500. I think they've had a couple of recent years, again, because of the COVID situation, where I think they've opened that up to nearly 600 plus or
Mhm.
minus, but they do keep it controlled because you don't want to, and it already is, I believe, when you get to the summit on that one day, because most of the organizations get there in and around the same couple of days, it can be a little bit of a traffic jam and you don't want to spend too much time at that altitude, even with oxygen tanks. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, they do keep a control on it.
Okay. And so what is the one thing you wish you had known before you went? Or was there something that you discovered along the way that you think might be a good hack?
No, I think with this particular trek, there's the thing that I found most surprising was the accessibility of it. Now, I would strongly recommend to anybody who is mobile and doesn't have too many issues on long walks to look at this as a potential experience. You can do some training beforehand on, incline treadmills and the like to test your body walking in those types of terrain. But, when you've got people in your group, I think we had maybe 4 or 5 who were in their mid to late 60s getting to Everest Base Camp without too many challenges or issues. And they weren't super fit humans. They were average people who were looking for an adventure. So, on that, in terms of hacks, no, I think just do some exercise and training and simple stuff just to get your body ready. Have your altitude pills. You can get them from pharmacies pretty easily, I think, over the counter these days, just in your back pocket, just in case. Again, health and safety don't get compromised in any situation. The other thing that I did pick up along the way at Namche, which is probably the biggest, most popular stop of all the stops up and down. It's like a really small town in the Himalayan mountains. It just so happens that the highest altitude Irish pub is there.
Yeah, there's always an Irish pub.
So yeah, I that was the only time I had a beer on the
Oh,
way
well
up,
done.
so I thought, yeah, why not? And I got a shirt that I took away with me. But yeah, I don't think I think just be ready to experience the amazing and appreciate the untouched serenity and environment standing amongst 8,000 plus meter mountains all around you. The final thing I would say is, which I did for this one, not so much the others, is I was at the back of the group taking my time. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's unusual for you.
very unusual, but walking very, very slowly, which you do anyway when you're going at altitude because you want to conserve all of the energy you have in your body and make those steps very slow and easy. But I was at the back because I couldn't take enough photos on the iPhone. I think by the end of the trek coming back, I had about 1,300 pictures on my phone. Like it was just that I just wanted to take pictures of everything to keep it in the memory because you may not get there again or whatever, and you just want to. Yeah, it's brilliant, beautiful, loved it.
I do have to say that out of all your trips that you've done without me, that was probably the most photos you kept pinging to us.
Mm. Yeah, and the Nepalese Sherpas that were with us along the way were brilliant young guys.
Yeah.
They were helpful, they were supportive, encouraging. Yeah, I got a picture with them at the Everest Base Camp Rock where it's got the altitude number there, and that's basically I've done Everest Base Camp,
Yeah.
and yeah, we had to jump into the photo together. It was awesome.
Thank you very much for coming on, Troy. There is an article on my website, Truly Expat Travel, for those who want more information about traveling to base camp. But thank you for coming on and supporting me on my very first episode.
Yeah, and look, one last thing before I leave. Have a think about it.
Yeah.
People hear the word Everest and they run for the hills. Not so much that hill, but it's a doable journey, and I can't recommend it highly enough for someone who just wants to see the world for what it was and what it still is in very, very few places on the planet.
It's exciting. I think, you know what? I think you might convince me to do it myself because I'm a hiker, not a climber. So join us again next on Truly Expat Travel Podcast, where I have another exciting destination in a world that's too big to be left unexplored. Ciao for now.